Hi, I'm Alan Johnson, a member of the United Church of Christ Mental Health Network Board of Directors. I've been part of the process of developing the W.I.S.E Congregation for Mental Health, welcoming, inclusive, supportive, and engaged for 8 years when it began. Our goal is to encourage congregations to be wise about mental health. There are many resources on our website, which will introduce the W.I.S.E process to you, as well as provide practical assistance. One of those resources is how to start a spiritual support group for mental health and wellness. Since stigma is so strong about mental illness, and isolation is one of the terrible realities of those who are living with mental health challenges, where can a person find some support? I will be speaking about one way a congregation can become a source of support and hope. That is, by starting a spiritual support group. This workshop will give the rationale for the group as well as provide practical steps to take in starting one. You will go away with a detailed outline of one group as well as a process of the guidelines that the group shares. These resources are on our website. I will respond to 17 questions which people ask. You can always email us, the United Church Mental Health Network, with your questions. Thank you. So, hello, I'm Alan Johnson, and I'm from the United Church of Christ Mental Health Network. And our topic for this workshop is how and why to start a spiritual support group for mental health and wellness. Now, I will talk about this one way that our congregation has done this over 6 years. And we've done it twice a month, all those years. I was one of the organizers of the group itself, and was a facilitator for 5 years. And I'm going to be sharing some of the practical steps about how we got there. And I'd like to begin with these three statements about a couple of participants. For me, this was the first time to say in front of others that I suffered from depression. Thank you for the spiritual support group. That was Maria. And Anne said, I was involved in a support group for those touched by bipolar illness for over 8 years, and I found a strong sense of community, and it helped me through some very difficult times. The spiritual support group helps ground me, makes me realize there's someone outside of myself who loves me unconditionally. The rituals of the group, the inspirational reading, all help to center myself and provide a depth of experience I did not have before. Last from Jen, listening, no judgment, empathy and sympathy. Also, and perhaps more importantly, a structured group that has boundaries for myself and my co-attendees, creating a safe, professional, and reliable environment. It's kind of interesting. The first one, Marie, it's the first time she's ever said out loud, I've lived with depression most of my life. She was in her early 60s. And I was wondering about that. It seems to me that it was one of these phrases that comes out of, sometimes it's the AA group. It says, you are only as sick as your secrets. And for her, that was one of the secrets that she lived with in her life, and found it very difficult to not find a place where she could share that as well. And the group that the person I quoted second decided it was a spiritual group. She's been part of facilitating a NAMI support group for many, many years. Lived with bipolar disorder, but she never found that spiritual component until she came to this group. She realized that there is someone, a center beyond herself, a God, a presence, a power, an eternal love, however you understand that spiritual relationship. And that's where she found it in this group. And it was Jen when she said she finally found a place where there was no judgment. There's a phrase that goes, if there's judgment in the room, the person disappears. Think about it. If you feel that indeed you're going to be judged, you're out of it, not quite there, yourself will disappear. So she had to find that place where she could really hear a story, share a story, and be caught up in it. It was W.I.S.E who said that God made humans because God loves stories. So the support group is a way in which some of our own particular stories can be shared. It's like a child. You know, a child is being tucked into bed and he's about to go to sleep, but he says, you know, Mom, I'm scared. I'm just scared. And so Mom says, don't worry. God will be with you. And he said, no, Mom, I want a God with skin on. Something tangible. And I think in many ways, a spiritual support group can be tangible. It's offering a helping, hoping presence in somebody's life and make it very real. For a spiritual support group means speaking and listening, healing, helping, and hoping. That's the way we can get together and share those stories. But what is a spiritual support group itself? The spiritual support group seeks to be a safe, sacred, supportive, spiritual, and welcoming space to speak and listen to experiences of ways that you have been affected by mental health, mental illness, or brain disorder issues, and raise the ways in which spirituality and religious traditions have been helpful or a hindrance in your recovery. For some who are affected by mental health challenges, there are experiences where religious language and the attitudes toward them as persons have been detrimental, not helpful. For instance, there was a person who went to a congregation, was listening to the sermon one Sunday, and the person who was preaching said, you know, if we just had more faith, if you just prayed a little harder, you would not need to take your medication. Now, the woman in the congregation was so glad that her son, who lives with schizophrenia, was not there next to her because he's continuing to struggle of whether or not to take his medication. Well, that person left and started another organization called the Interfaith Network on Mental Illness, providing support and understanding to clergy and lay people around mental health issues and concerns. So I assume that you're here because you want to know a little bit about a spiritual support group, or maybe you are part of one or haven't really thought about it, but here we are so we can find some experience that you can come and bring some of your own interest to this subject as well. So how do we get to where we were in having a spiritual support group? It really was a strong encouragement from the senior minister. In the congregation that I was a member, in one family, had 2 adult children, both who lived with diagnosable mental illnesses, and each of them ended their life within a year of each other. Devastating, beyond devastation. And so the senior minister turned to me and said, what can we do about this? I said, well, I don't know. She knew that I have a son who lives with a bipolar disorder for the last 27 years and substance abuse. He's lived with this and been hospitalized in lock wards at least 20 times over the last 27 years. So she knew that. And I had a brother who had ended his life 10 years before this experience in the congregation where I was a member. So I thought, well, maybe there's something that I could do about it. And also the fact the person who asked me, the senior minister, was my wife. And so I decided that I better pay attention to that as well. which was really good. And it really get us going. So I decided the first thing is, let's put something in an invitation to start a task force. Put something in the bulletin. Again, there are a couple of us, me and at least one other person in this congregation, said, well, let's just start something. Let's see if anybody else is interested. Raise the flag, see who shows up, right? And so we sent out invitations to start the task force on mental health, and there were about 9 people that showed up. And we began to say, well, we began telling some of our own stories, supporting each other. Some of the people have never known what was going on in our fellow members' lives. And we said, well, I don't know a whole lot about mental health. Why don't we start with some education? And there happened to be, in this church, every Sunday there was an adult education program before the worship service. And so I said, and usually in those kind of committees that are having adult education programs, they need to have some topics to discuss. So we said, well, how about our little task force that we'll choose the second Sunday of every month, and we'll do something on education on mental health. Now, again, it doesn't have to be once a month. It could be once every 2 months, every 3 months, whatever. But there was already a forum there that we could also have the topic addressed. And so that congregation did that, therefore, 65 different times, different programs. Not a dime was spent. No money. Everybody was local. You just had a little group thinking about, what do we want to know about? What do we want to understand? And then putting that in the bulletin and inviting people to come from the congregation, it began to elevate the church's consciousness of the importance of mental health in our life. So that was a very helpful way that began to start the education going. And then I went to the NAMI Family to Family program. I would not recommend anything better than the NAMI 12-week Family to Family program for your full understanding for what mental health is all about. From medication to support to resources that are available, peer support. It was tremendous for me. Now, this is now almost 10 years ago. And at that particular point, I'm a clergy, and I had been a chaplain, and I had been a minister in the congregations, but I didn't know a whole lot about mental health. I really didn't. I thought I'd do a lot of counseling. I'd gone to the hospital. I'd been to psych wards, all that kind of stuff, but I'd understand it. And the one thing that I got out of NAMI, among others, was number one, among the causes or the contributors for mental health is a biological basis in the brain. When I got that, I said, oh my goodness, my son has been dealing with this, and I thought if he just had to kind of shape up, or whatever you try to do, right? I mean, go with the doctors and stay on your medication. I didn't understand the biological basis, one of the bases, along with genetic as well as your environment as well. So that was a huge and very, very helpful for me, something for me from NAMI, which I continue to support very, very much. So then we decided to go from the task force to a mental health ministry team. And so that meant that we took that to the church council. I don't know what is in your organization, your church, what the kind of the overseeing body is, and said, okay, we want you to name these 7 people, and we are now part of the mental health ministry team of the church. And they blessed it. You've got to have the clergy involved in this, but not have the clergy lead it. And because there's too much on a clergy person's plate already. But they need to know about what you are envisioning, and it needs to be claimed by the church. which was really very, very important as well. So then, over the years, we said, well, let's also start decided to start the spiritual support group. And the spiritual support group, we again started almost 6 years ago. And, nope, not going to get there yet. So we had to, how do you communicate to a congregation that there is a prevalence of mental health issues? So we came up with this, I thought, a great idea. Usually it's 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 4 persons are affected by health issues in their life in 1 year, right? That's one of the statistics that NAMI uses as well. So we decided to take every 4th bulletin on Mental Health Sunday, which is the 3rd Sunday in May, and put a red sticker on the 4th bulletin. And then during the service, when we came to the time for the litany to be shared, the person said, we invite those who will notice on their bulletin there is a red sticker. If you will either stand in body or spirit or raise your hand before we read the litany. And everybody kind of paused and we looked around and all these people began standing and hands go up. And so people are looking around saying, this is a demonstration of the fact it's among us, 1 out of 4. And there's another congregation that's a little more, I would say, more courageous than the one that I was part of, and that is that the clergy says, how many of you have experienced or know about somebody who's lived with mental health issues? 90% of the hands went up. So, in other words, it is bringing it out of the closet, naming something that is actually prevalent in terms of where we are, what's going on. So we began the spiritual support group. I began by reading Craig Rendebound's book called Souls in the Hands of the Tender God. It's a wonderful list. One of the resources that's downstairs has that book listed, as well as one by Nancy Kehoe. It's called Wrestling with Your Inner Angels, a journey to your own mental health and wellness. It's really also very good. So I experienced a spiritual support group when they were presenting it in different contexts where I was present. And then we took that idea, and I'm going to share the process of what we actually do. And since talking about spiritual support groups, locally in Boulder, we have one that started now in the synagogue, one has started in the Roman Catholic Church, one has started in the Unitarian Universalist Church, and I have 2 presentations coming up, one in the Quakers meeting and one with the Lutherans in April. So in other words, all you need is a seed. All you need is an idea and say, maybe we could do this. Maybe it's possible. We'll see. So there are a number of reasons why we ought to have a spiritual support group. So I just said 1 out of 4 persons are already live with a challenge. Faith communities are called to be compassionate. Speaking about mental health concerns breaks the silence on mental illness. I think we know that if indeed the story that we're able to share is truthful, people will say, yeah, that resonates and it is real, true, and we need to bring that forth. And there are positive and negative experiences around faith or religious beliefs. There's some people who have not had a very positive, shall we say, support for their own mental health endeavors. So there have been some faith traditions that have been more negative than positive. So it's good to be aware of that and be very attuned to what that might mean. And sharing strategies and disciplines with peers. That's the 5 reasons, I think, why these things are really, really important. To share some wisdom and to learn and grow together. The ingredients of a spiritual support group, they're kind of simple things. A question is where does the support group reside in your structure, in your church? Is it part of a caring ministry? Is it part of the parish relationship concern? Is it around maybe Stephen's ministry? What might be going on in your congregation? Where is it lodged? And I think that I'll talk a little more about that later, but that's really important. And what's the environment like? And we always have 2 facilitators at every meeting. And I'm going to say just a minute about that, because a person's in recovery is a person who is actually living with the lived experience of a mental illness. It could be a faith leader, the clergy. This one is a rabbi in the one of the synagogue. It could be a counselor, somebody who might be shall we say, a professional mental health worker, or just a mental health advocate. Could be a family member who's affected by mental health challenges. That would have been my situation, as well as a faith leader. Or somebody who has some experience in leading groups. Now the question is, how do you blend those? Because obviously you only need maybe 2 who are kind of regular, and you have some backups, at least 2 backups. Then those are very essential ingredients in what you need to bring forth in terms of who would be a facilitator at the group. And I think I wanted to also say that any combination of those, and I want to underscore again, I think that a facilitator needs to be grounded in the teachings of mental health from NAMI. That has been very crucial, very important for us. And there's a new program that you might have heard about as well. It's called Mental Health First Aid. Mental Health First Aid, which came out of an organization in Australia, is now through Maryland, Behavioral Health, and now it's throughout the whole country. I've been part of those. We've offered some resources for spirituality as a component in one's recovery at Mental Health First Aid, and we've done that a couple different ways. But again, Mental Health First Aid is another place. But so the facilitators themselves need to be grounded in their own understandings of mental health concerns and issues, so that they can also be good facilitators. So one of the things that really is important is the ritual or the format of the spiritual group. A ritual gives a boundary. A ritual gives a context in which, if one facilitator comes and another one the next time and a different one, if the format for the group is so structured that anybody who could come in who has been there before but now have a different facilitator because the facilitator is maybe out of town or whatever, it's very familiar. It's about the ritual and the process of engaging each other with the spiritual issues around mental health and wellness. It's not about who the facilitator is or who the participants are. It's the ritual that creates that space, so that we begin by having them read the guidelines. And that's also is a very helpful way. And again, we invite people to pass if they don't want to read one. You always allow people to say, pass. They don't have to say anything at all. People can come to a group. There are people who have come to this group. We've done this, again, I said 5-6 years, so we've done it 124 times. And there's some people just, they're there not to speak, but they're there to absorb. That's all they could handle because what was going on in their life. Whatever. So you say if you want to read, you can. So we go around everybody, which actually that's the group actually that developed the guidelines themselves. So when we all agree on that, we then close the door. That is really important we didn't realize when you do that, okay, we all are agreeing now on the guidelines. We're all here. And it is now time to close the door. This is now a safe space. This space is now set aside for a different way of engaging with each other than we do sometimes outside of this kind of a group. And then we ask if somebody is willing to light the candle. We have a table, we have chairs around, and it's amazing. Out of the 124 times, there's always one person who feels motivated to get them stand up, take the match, and light the candle, and either say words or say no words at all. But the people who don't say some things, they say like, "I am so glad that there's light." Or one of the persons who does, "I like this," they're like, "I didn't think I could get out of bed today, but I knew about coming here tonight, and it's going to bring light into my life." Or whatever word that comes to them, these like, there's amazing, very, very simple liturgy or structure. Then there's a very short reading. It might be a poem. We've not usually used scripture. I find it interesting. Again, your context is different than this context, where I'm from. But whatever kind of a reading, would it be a poem, an aphorism, an insight? So there's just a little reading to kind of set the mood. And then we spend time together in quiet for 1 minute. I have a stopwatch, and I use the stopwatch to do 1 minute. And that is one of the longest minutes many people have had during the whole day. But it's amazing how important that time of being quiet together is. And it allows people to take some breaths. And then we come to a close and say, "Let us now be here." And then we begin with the engagement with what we want to say. And it's kind of like an introduction in some ways. And it's any one of these. We use the word snapshot. We don't want to hear the rehearsal of what happened for the whole week, or the 2 weeks, or 3 weeks since we've been together. It's not the whole rehearse. I want just a snapshot. What's going on for you? What's happening? How you doing? What's for you? Or what's a recent challenge? Or I found that it was really helpful for me to write in my journal this week. It was really good for me. Great discipline. Helped me a lot. Or I took a wonderful walk in the foothills this week, and I hadn't been out for a long time. The snapshot, kind of saying what there is, and what has changed since you were here last, or what do you bring here today? What's hearing today? And so those are just some way to kind of get people engaged. Then the facilitators are the ones who expand on some of the common themes that we've just heard in the snapshot. It could be like, it sounds like we're talking about some people who are taking care of themselves. Do you want to say some more about what do you do for taking care of yourself? Kind of expand the conversation a little bit. Or we're talking a little bit about trust here. You know, a couple of you were talking about what do you really trust? What is it like to trust? And so there's some themes that emerge out of the group. Or if a facilitator on occasion will inject a question or a theme. For instance, so how has your faith been activated out of what you're going through? Just an open-ended question. Where have you found your hope recently? And it's an open-ended question. So again, the facilitator is not guiding, but trying to create the space open enough so people can bring forth what they want to share. So the facilitator might expand a little bit on some of those common themes. We always, how about that? Allow for science, just like we did, just in this moment. Trying to figure the computer. There's some people who find it very awkward if you're in a group and there's no one talking. Say, we have to say something, do something. No, we don't. And sometimes that old phrase is actually right. Silence is golden. Sometimes it is. So allow some of the people that are more introverted than extroverted to spend some time just kind of getting inside, allowing some of that quiet time to happen. And then we have some time at the quiet time. Again, another minute. And it's amazing. That second minute from the first to this last one toward the end of the group, as we're getting close to an hour and a half, we have about another 10 minutes to go or so. It's amazing that minute goes so fast. Because we've asked people to think about, as we've been here this evening, what is a phrase that you're going to take with you from our time together? Or what were you sharing or that you heard that was something different for you? Or maybe something you haven't heard yet, and what's come to you at this particular moment? And so we allow, during that 1 minute, things going through people's minds, what they're thinking about. And then we're saying, what are you going to take with you from this evening? And just before we get to the time when we say, because they're bringing wisdom now, not perfection, they're bringing wisdom out of the group. We've been together an hour and a half, and there's usually some real gems in terms of the honest statements of people's lives. So there's wisdom that is there. And they say, as we blow the candle out, it's lit in the beginning by one person. Now we're all together going to blow the candle out. We're all in a circle. Usually we've had from 6 to 12 people. That's kind of like the average. So we've got a nice circle. And so the candle is there in the center of the table, and say, okay, where you're sitting, let's see if we can all blow the candle out from where we're sitting. Ever done that? No. So we're all go. Everybody tries to blow it out. Never goes out. So we get, bring your chair together. Everybody gets a little closer. Let's try again. Doesn't work. So by now, everybody is very close and pretty close together, very close to the candle. And they say, okay, let's all blow it out together. And they all do it together. We blow it out, and a cheer that look at what we did. And said, now you're taking that light that we all have been with this evening, and now we've extinguished that light so it now goes inside you. So as you leave, you take that light with you wherever you go. This day, this night, and then until we see each other again. So that is blowing out the candle. And that's kind of like that really is the format. That's the structure. That's the ritual. It's almost always the same. Now some of the different ingredients, obviously, the reading or the question we ask to be prompts or the introduction, but that is the ritual. And I tell you, if the candle isn't there, not good. We need to have that there. So this is really very good too. So one of the things that I have said before is the spiritual guidelines, and it was again the group that put these together. And I know that you do have a copy, and it is also on our website. So we don't have to go through all these, but these are the ones that we have everybody to read, as probably you did in the core group today. We read one person reads one guideline at a time as we go. For instance, like 3 is, it's okay to say silence. You can pass at any time, which is really terrific. Share feelings. Our main purpose is not to resolve difficulties, but to listen. We use I statements, which is very, very important. We're open to experiences of how one's faith or spirituality has been a help or a hindrance. Again, that copy is there with you. And one of the things that is really important for us is confidentiality. I was talking to somebody who was saying, you know, I'm not sure I want some of my own experiences, my own story, to get around. You know what that means, to get around? Or say, I don't want everybody in the church to know about what's going on in my life or with my child or my husband, my spouse, my partner, my child, whatever it might be. Well, if anything is shared in the support group, it is confidential there. And we underscore that. Everybody reads it. We cannot share whatever a person says here anywhere else, period. I go to a local gym, and I, having been a facilitator, there is one of the participants from the support group who's there, has a trainer, is working out. I never make eye contact with this person. I don't acknowledge the person. I don't at all, unless that person acknowledges me. In other words, we don't know each other outside that group as a facilitator. Now, members of the group, they get together, they get coffee, they go out, they play golf together. I mean, there's a whole lot of things. They can do whatever they want. They can acknowledge each other. A facilitator's role is very different in terms of that. It is not about a personal relationship outside of the group unless that person would like to say, oh, how are you doing, Alan? It's good to see you. How's the workout going? I would acknowledge that, because then I would know them. Because otherwise, the person might say, why is he, how do you know him? The trainer would say to her, well, very inappropriate. Anyway, so confidentiality is very, very important. So it gives the sense of strength to the group itself to have those kind of boundaries, I think, that are very, very important. We provide a safe environment. We share without judgment. We keep the comments in the here and now. And that's really a very interesting one, because some people will have a sense of like, you know, as you remember, 10 years ago, when I went through this experience, well, that's a long time ago. Let's stay in the here and now right now. What's going on right now? What's happening here? And so that's been a very helpful guidelines. And so once in a while, the facilitator has to come and say, like, and now we all agreed on this, let's stay in the here and now. How is that? That's okay? Can we come back to that? So that's also the role of a facilitator, to kind of keep that safe place and remind people that they have agreed with the guidelines, if indeed we're almost broaching one, which is very important too. And we do begin and end on time. That is very, very important. And we start on the minute. We really do. A couple of people come late, we have already closed the door. They're obviously to come in, but we don't wait for people. That's the time. It starts for us. It was at 7 o'clock and ends at 8:30, and that was it. So the one of the ways that the word got out, and as I mentioned, sometimes we have anywhere from 6, 7 to 12, 14 people. At least half of the people are not part of the faith community where we're located. They're from the community. So how do we get the word out? I love our local NAMI affiliate. They have a great mailing list, and so we send out this announcement. It's pretty simple. It's for persons affected with mental health challenges as well as family and friends. It's free. This is a sentence. This confidential and safe group is to share, learn, and grow in a supportive environment, and is facilitated by. That's all it is. We put it in the newspaper because they have the religious section on Saturdays, And so it goes in making reference to the Monday night meeting twice a month. And it's free. And people call. I mean, I have had my, when I say information, I've had my telephone number, my email address, and I get call from people saying, oh, is it this Monday or the next one? Remind me. So the word does get out that way through the obviously our church bulletin, as well as the NAMI affiliate, as well as the local newspapers. Very helpful to get the word out in terms of that way. Because it's very interesting. There was one person who was a member of our congregation and only knew about the sport group because it was announced in the bulletin. And the person said, well, you know, that's interesting. My neighbor just came out of a psychiatric institution. She had been hospitalized. I wonder if she, though she's not part of my congregation, maybe she'd be interested in going to a support group. And so the church member goes across the street and says, would you like to go to the meeting? Here's the information about it, and show up. She's been going for the last several years. So it was just a member who herself was not part of the group, but knew about it, and also knew that this might be a need that this person might really welcome. And that was really very, very important, I think. When I do get telephone calls, this is the main question they ask. What is spiritual about it? You know, do I have to believe a particular thing to come? What does that mean? What does that really mean? And my answer has always been that I say, well, when we meet, we make sure, we claim that space is itself spiritual. I've just put it out there. She's probably still listening. A person will be heard, and a person may speak honestly and truthfully. I think that's spiritual. Will be listened to deeply, that we will ask if there is a spiritual practice that has been helpful, like prayer, meditation, worship, singing, movement. And we may ask what it is that is sacred to someone. We might ask that question. Are we saying what it is? No. We'll ask maybe what is sacred for you. The guideline states this group welcomes all faith traditions or none, and welcomes everyone's understanding or experience of spirituality. And that's how we leave it. And almost everybody comes to the group. They realize it's not going to be constrictive. It's something that this person could feel more welcomed and be part of it. So this is more of a definitional thing. But I particularly like it. It's a little dense in some ways, but spirituality refers to one's understanding of one's meaning or purpose in life. It's connection with a transcendent or ultimate power, a power greater than oneself, experience of the sacred, or a set of values that guides one's life. So if somebody says, what is spirituality? That's the kind of things that I would say also, if they really are interested in that. What's your purpose of life? Well, what gives you meaning? Where's your hope come from? Do you have a sense of a transcendent power in your own life? What do you think is sacred for you? What is sacred? What kind of values guides your life? Those are the ways that I kind of talk a little more about what spirituality might be. Obviously, there are conversations about spiritual issues are welcome, and exploration of what gives hope is invited. In one's recovery, spiritual can be a resource with medications, talk therapy, complementary therapies. It's not just one. So we're not just talking about spirituality, as I said about that other example of a clergy who was talking about faith without medication. That can be one of the resources, along with others, in terms of one's recovery and one's management of their own situation. So if I were sitting in your place, which I am right now, But these would be the questions that I would ask. And then we're going to open up for other questions as well. What keeps this from being a therapy or a counseling session? What's the difference? Here's what I would think. We make clear at the beginning of the group that this is a support group. Just have to name it. This is not a therapy group. This is called a support group. The facilitators here are not therapists. They're not going to charge you for anything. It's free. And no one is going to prescribe medication for you. This is a support group. It is not a therapy. We're clear that giving advice is not really allowed unless a person asks for it. And using the I statements is, well, this is what I think. This is my experiences. This is my story is, rather than saying, well, this is what you ought to do, which is not really a good counseling technique anyway, but it is very different. A support group is not a therapy group in terms of that. So what is the role of the facilitators? I've said some things about as well, but we have the two therapists, the facilitators, because we have two set of eyes and ears, so we can understand what's being said, what somebody is actually experiencing in their own life. And I think the facilitators sustain a group that provides a safe, supportive, and sacred space. If a person leaves abruptly, and that has happened a couple of times, somebody gets up and leaves. We have two facilitators because one goes with that person, unless they already indicated they're going to the restroom and they need another, some tea or whatever it might be. And that's happened a couple of times. I went with a particular person, young woman who was dealing with an eating disorder, and it was just overwhelming for her to be in a group that would really listen to her. Just too much. She couldn't take it. So I went out with her and just sat with her for a good 20 minutes. Just as she kind of came back, and we talked and listened and talked and listened, and then so that's why we had two facilitators. It's really, really important for that to happen as well. So how often do we offer it? Again, the one that we're talking about, we met twice a month, every year for, as I said, almost 6 years. In season, out of season, so that people knew there was a regular time where we could get together and have the groups. And there's some groups I know that meant they meet like once a month. I know that there are other support groups that people go to, NAMI support groups. I know there's also DBSA, the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance. I know AAs, I know Al-Anon, Codependence Anonymous, all those groups. So some people just say, I just need the spiritual support group, maybe just once a month. That's good for me. Or even once every 2 months, whatever it might be. Who's invited? That's been a kind of an interesting experience for us as well. Anyone who's affected by a mental health challenge, that's how we put it out. That's who is welcome to come anytime. And it can be persons who are living with a mental health challenge or those their loved ones are. There is one congregation, the one that we helped start in a Roman Catholic church. They have two different groups. So there's one for persons who are living with mental health issues, and there's another group for the persons who are loved ones who are experiencing how their lives are being affected by mental health issues as well. The one in the synagogue is very clearly for persons who are Jewish but are open to others. But there's prayers out of the Hebrew tradition. Depends on the context is really what it is. This is not a cookie cutter. These are the guidelines, but how it works in your space would be different than anything else. How about money? There is no money with the spiritual support group at all. If indeed you've already gone through the process of having the congregation approve your mental health ministry, therefore the congregation is saying, we're making this space available for one of our ministries, And so if it's free. We're not paying for that space. So it's free. There's no money involved at all, which I think is very, very important as well. What makes the group conducive? The space. No fluorescent lights. That's one. I found those. Nor metal folding chairs, unless that's all you have. It has to be comfortable in some way. So it feels very welcoming and welcoming for people. I already mentioned how people get invited. And the one thing I did not mention, that there are people who are coming to the support group, spiritual support group, who are being referred by a therapist in the community because they heard about this. Since we've done it for 5 years, the word gets around, and they never tested to see where we are, but obviously they had talked with some of their clients who might have gone, and so then other clients, it's like, have you thought about it? Here's another option. So I thought that was an amazing, understanding that indeed the therapist would know that indeed spiritual assessment is crucial in somebody who's really willing to be open to spirituality as another resource in one's recovery. So that was a way that the word got out through that particular person. I had mentioned the number of facilitators. That we, again, have at least 2 backup facilitators, which is also very, very important. Again, as I said earlier, so that the structure itself is the container. It's not the facilitators themselves. So that the facilitators would come in and out depending on their travel as well, or what's going on in their life. But we had enough, so there are always 2 at every one of those groups. What do we do if there's, when do we not have the group? The only time we've never had the spiritual support group was on Christmas Eve one year. That was it. But we had a potluck the Tuesday before. So, the Tuesday after Christmas Eve. So that was very important because we think it was very, very important that would continue and be available. What do you do if somebody's in crisis? We never had somebody really in a crisis where we had to call 911. But we're available and ready to do it if we need to, because we know if we called 911 that we would ask for a CIT-trained police officer. That's called a Crisis Intervention Trained Police Officer. And those are persons who are trained. They spend a whole week in training to identify if maybe there is a mental health issue, concern that's going on in the situation. So you don't show up with your sirens blasting and your guns out or whatever. So these persons are really trained to how to engage with that. Obviously we have cell phones with us, both of the facilitators. We know that there is a walk-in crisis center, which is available 24/7 in where we live. So that would be another option to take the person to that center. We have all the telephone numbers you need in terms of a suicide hotline, if that's important as well. There's now a program actually in Longmont, Connecticut, Colorado. It's called EDGE, and that is they have a trained counselor that goes with a police officer if they know it's a mental health situation that they're dealing with. Which is, why can't we put money into that? I mean, that is so important. That would be so I think, helpful. Do you need insurance? Again, if it's part of the church's program, all the programs of the church are already insured. You don't have to worry about it. That's what we said anyway, and that's what we learned. We set up different kind of boundaries, obviously, that were going on. There was one person who was coming and seemed like almost every 2 weeks would bring up her hostility toward the local mental health center. Really annoyed because her services that she was not receiving made her so annoyed. She was very unhappy. At every group she'd bring it up. So we'd sit down, talk with her. I did that a couple of times and said, listen, here are some of the people at that center that I know, and you can talk with them. That would be good. But bringing that over and over, we can't really resolve this. It's not a group that has that way to resolve that. Now, we're welcome you to come anytime. But I think at this particular point, that particular issue is not part of our conversation here. And so that had to be a boundary. And she decided not to come. Maybe she worked it out. Maybe she didn't. I don't know. But we decided we have to have that boundary. We had tried as much as we could in terms of what we knew, and then that was the end of that. So do you always, is it time limited? Until there's a need, you keep it going. To whom to report, that is the church council, obviously. We have print, video, books that are available. We always have to show up as something to drink or eat. We always have water, grapes usually, sometimes cookies. Those are options for people who would wish. And you always have clean tissues. You have the glasses of water, you have the bowl of grapes, you have the cookies, you have the candle lit, and you have a box of tissues. What does that tell you? You can cry here. It's okay. Fred Buechner said, unexpected tears are the epiphany, the manifestation of the holy. And I think that is so true. And there's so many times when tears have come as people are telling some of these stories or listening to other people with their deep, compassionate hearts, and the tears come. Yet almost always, I have found that people then lead into laughter. Because we've carved a space for the tears, there's enough depth for there to be laughter. It's always worked that way for me. The psalmist got it right. Weeping tarries for the night, joy comes in the morning. And I believe that is absolutely true. So one of my favorite authors is Anne Lamott, that hope begins in the dark, the stubborn hope that if you just show up and try to do the right thing, the dawn will come. You wait and watch and work, and you don't give up. I love her words, and hope is so much important in terms of my life. The resources on the spiritual support group are on our website. How to start the group, some of the things I've been sharing. Obviously, you now have a resource here that's been taped, can make that available as well. And any other questions that you might have, please connect with me if you wish. We can do that, but thank you very much for being here.